It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hey, it's Shantae.
And I'm Natalie, and welcome to What's the Deal, a podcast powered by the Norfus Firm. At the Norfus Firm, we solve people problems and have the great pleasure of working with employers all around the world on HR and DEI initiatives. Good morning.
Morning.
So we're here and have lots to talk about, per usual.
Yeah.
We have this Beef at Work series. That's kind of like the working title, not really, because one of the episodes already out and it doesn't have that on it, but that's the theme of it. That's the theme of it, right? Beef at work.
Yeah.
And again, for purposes of shared language, that's workplace conflict. Mm-hmm. And so we realize that it's really important to create the context of not just how you deal with or identify conflict, but how do you avoid it in the first place?
That's a big one because it's a waste of time. I mean, it's going to happen because people are people and they're going to have things come up and upset one another. People. Yeah. But if we can create an environment that like lowers that risk, then that's really what we want to strive for.
Exactly. So if we start off in thinking about the best way we see for identifying opportunities for workplace conflict mm-hmm. is doing a workplace culture assessment, right? And understanding where are your boiling points or where are your pressure cooker points across the organization. So before we get into how we go about doing that, that's actually one of the things we really love doing.
Yeah, it's fun.
It is.
Because we're nerds.
Exactly.
And so we get all nerdy about the data and the people and all the things that come up.
We get real jazzed.
Yeah,
we get if you see us like in our spaces, we either have on a whiteboard, we get real
Excel,
like
something's open.
Yeah, we're always like, wait, how can we do it better? Like we get really like real nerdy about it.
We geek out over it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that we're super pleasured to talk about it today.
Well, with it.
Okay. All right. So first things first, workplace culture. Yeah. What's the definition?
Yep.
There are a lot of definitions, but the one that they all kind of circle around the same points, but we love a short, concise definition. And this one is powerful because I think the one that we work from, because like every word means something. Mm-hmm. So workplace culture are the values, beliefs, norms, and practices that define an organization. So a short way of looking at that is the way you do things, mm-hmm. the acceptable way to do things in your organization. But I think when I think about the values, beliefs, and norms, those are what we're always coming at when we come in, because the reality is most of the time people are able to tell us what their culture isn't, but they aren't able to tell us what our culture is. Right. And I think that is sort of an important starting point when you're thinking about conflict, because if there isn't a clarity on what are your values, beliefs, and norms, everyone's going to say, well, this is what the culture is. This mm-hmm. is my way of doing it is a culture. Your way of doing it is not the culture. And so I think that's been fascinating how often we walk into places with an undefined culture.
Yeah. And it's interesting because people will default to their own. Which is fine if it's aligned, right? Like if you have the same values, beliefs, and you work in a similar way, then yeah, that works. But it's where it comes, where some of the conflict can stem from is when those values, beliefs, and norms are misaligned mm-hmm. to the organization, and then also to your colleagues and your coworkers. And so it may not be obvious, but a lot of times that's where it starts. And so it's really figuring out, okay, so where is the misalignment happening?
Yep. And we've talked about this before. I think we should probably have to drop the clip.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, what is the damn standard, right? Because it's frustrating. that becomes so frustrating because you're just like, everybody's operating from what they think works mm-hmm. or what they think the right way is.
Right.
And I think it's kind of stunning how often senior leaders and senior HR folks kind of skip past the fact that we're not being real clear about what's expected here or what the standards are. So that's a side plug for, you're going to definitely have a lot of conflict if people aren't clear on what's acceptable in your workplace. Mm-hmm. It's definitely that creates the fertile ground for beef at work.
Right. Exactly. So like, can we take a moment just to go into that just a little bit deeper?
Of course.
So what happens? Like what happens right before we get to this point where they're calling us basically, where organizations are calling us because they feel like they need something, some sort of, they don't really understand what's happening and they need an audit or an assessment. But what precipitated it or preceded this point where they're reaching out to us? Wow.
Well, we have a number of examples. Sometimes you've gotten called out on social media. And, you know, folks are saying, hey, this is not a place to work for people of color, or this is not a place to work for parents or caregivers. And so they're dealing with bad press, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So that's sometimes how people have come to us. Mm-hmm. Other times people have come to us because they're seeing like a mass exodus of a certain group. A lot of times we hear about like mass exodus of Black women. That seems to be something we hear a lot.
Yeah.
We've had situations where there's lots and lots of complaints about a senior leader or senior leaders not being fair or whatever the case may be, or bullying or mistreating people.
Right.
And then other times people just want to know what's going on, which are the great times because you're not reacting to a situation. You're able to kind of go in and be open with just understanding what the information is. I think in those other situations when you're reacting to some kind of conflict or issue, you're more in not desperation, but you're more, you have less room to be like open. Like you're more trying to solve a particular issue.
Right.
Which can be a little bit harder because people get really zeroed in on that one particular issue, and there may be other issues that you need to deal with.
And just, we might be getting ahead of ourselves here, but I think it's interesting because they are coming at it just to solve a problem. But then when you bring up other things that are impacting, like helping to create this, they don't want to hear it because they just want to stay focused on this thing. But it's like, but that's you got to get to the root, which is again why you do the assessments and why we come in. But that can also be a challenge.
Talk about the root, because I think that point gets so lost for like what you're saying. Like it's the whole like. I think I've said this many times, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it again. Shantae will ask one question and unravel the whole sweater, right? And one of her great questions when things start getting really clunky is, what does success look like? Yeah. And when you stop and you're like, well, I don't really know, actually. That's a good question. But it is one of those things where the why are we doing this is important.
Yeah. I mean, because it's obvious that something's happening that isn't ideal. Okay. So, most times, right?
Yes. Okay.
Because again, to the point, like you said, not everyone's trying to improve something that's already working because resources are limited. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. But so normally when they're calling us, it's because something isn't working right. And so really wanting to get to the root, but of what the problem is and what's happening. But a lot of these times when we're in this, they short circuit it. So they don't do the proper digging, which we're going to get into what that is as we go through this particular episode. But it's like they want to just do shortcuts. They want to talk to a very limited number of people. They just want to focus on this particular issue. But it's like, nothing happens in a vacuum. And so you got to really look at and assess, hence an assessment, what's really happening in your organization, at a number of levels in order to really get a full picture of what's possibly creating the environment for this conflict.
I appreciate you saying that, because what came up for me when you were saying that is that if you're going to do, I just want to make sure, let's like take a step back and another step back. And what is a workplace culture assessment? It is going in and understanding, are your beliefs, values, norms being held up on a day-to-day basis in the way people do work? And if they aren't, why? Do people feel like the leaders aren't living the values, norms, beliefs? Do they feel like the processes are unfair? Does, that's sort
There's
of
a double standard, favoritism, all sorts of things can pop up.
But when you're going to decide to start talking to people, you don't get to decide what they're going to tell you. No. And I that's the thing I think that gets like a little tripped up here, is that you want to get really focused in on one thing, but you're sending in people, us, who are experts in holding space and talking to people and asking the questions. And I can never know, and I'm sure you feel the same way, what someone's going to share. I mean, you have no idea what they're going to share. And so then what are we supposed to say to them? No, they don't care about that.
Right.
Don't tell us that part. Like, I'm going to pretend like you didn't say that because I only want to know about this one topic. Like, that's not even how a normal conversation goes. And so I think sometimes, and we've had this conversation a lot lately, it takes it back to humanity.
Yeah.
You have to have the humanity overlay. You can't just look at your fancy spreadsheets and your academic plans written down and saying, this is how it has to happen. We have this problem. We need to solve this specific problem.
Right.
You're dealing with people.
Yep.
They have feelings. They have thoughts. They have different ways of expressing themselves. So I will just start off by saying, if you're going to do a workplace assessment, you got to get yourself that self-awareness piece together of understanding people are going to say what comes to their mind. People are going to sometimes be very raw, and understanding that might make you very uncomfortable, and it make you feel like we're off topic because you're trying to solve a particular problem. But that's just not how you collect information from a human being. Exactly. So just to be clear, and I will just put this out there. I'm doing a lot of breathing in this microphone. Sorry, y'all. That the reality is, I don't even know what I was about to put out there. I forgot. That's okay. So, so when we come back to all of this, I was going to say this about investigation interviews. As we know, I do investigations. I talk to people all day, every day. Mm-hmm. And I will gently say, I don't need that context. Thank you. And they're like, no, but I want to tell you. Okay. Right. No matter what, even in an investigation, I can narrow the scope because I am looking to solve a particular issue or understand a particular issue, which is much different than a workplace culture assessment. Correct. And I can't tell you, you've actually heard some of these interviews where I'm like, okay, no, thanks, but I don't need to know that. No, but I really want to tell you. But I really want to tell you.
It's important because people want to be seen and they want to be heard.
Exactly.
And if you're gonna create an opportunity for them to have that experience, you got to go all the way in. You just let them go with it, and then most people, when they get it out, you can rein them in, right? But once you open up that dam, they're gonna go.
Put on a rain jacket.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what's first step in an assessment?
Well, I think we're kind of talking about the very, very first step, which is, are you ready for one?
Yeah.
Are you even ready to really get into this and understand what's happening in this space? Sometimes your hand is forced. Again, when we talk about if you're trying to solve for an issue or something really bad is happening in your organization and you don't have a choice, then okay. But sometimes, even with that, are you really, really ready for this? Mm-hmm. Because if you're not, find another way. Find another way. Don't go digging if you're not ready to really uncover what's there.
I actually just had a conversation like this yesterday with a client that was having some hand force issues. And what was clear to me and the client context I was talking to is that the decision makers really aren't so ready to have the bigger conversation of how they move some of these equity issues forward and the like. And that's okay, right? And so they asked me for some feedback on their culture assessment questions that they already ask. And like, are there DEI questions we should ask or whatever? And I was just like, until you're ready to have the bigger conversation, until you're ready to act on this type of feedback, I wouldn't add any more questions. Right. There are questions you already have that can tell a story about DEI or how certain pockets of employees are experiencing the workplace. But I wouldn't introduce something new that would potentially get the employees the false impression that you actually are going to address these DEI issues or not if you're not ready to. And it was interesting because I wrote that in an email and they were like, can we talk? And I was like, of course. Sure. And so when I talk, it's like, I think they felt like I was being flippant. And I was like, no, really and truly, you have some good questions here, some of which we would use or recommend, but I wouldn't add any questions that specifically talk about DEI because you're not ready. And your famous phrase comes up and I'm gonna have you explain it. Stop playing in people's faces. Don't play in my face.
Stop. Don't do this to people.
And so talk about what that means in this context of not playing in someone's face.
It's not genuine. It's inauthentic. Like people already know, because part of the issue is that you don't really live this value, right? Like that's why it's coming up. That's what they're calling you out on it, at least in this particular situation. And so now you coming in here trying to do this thing, it feels fake. Yeah. Because you haven't set it up properly. You haven't done we're really trying to understand what's happening. We know that there's an opportunity for growth here, or whatever the language is that you want to communicate around it. It's the change process. You haven't really initiated a proper change process to really start to work on these issues to really be able to open it up.
And sometimes I think what we see a lot along those lines is that there's somebody whose voice hasn't been heard, meaning maybe an HR person is saying, look, we're getting a lot of complaints and people are complaining about these similar things. And that HR person is feeling that they've been like brushed off by, senior leaders. They get a budget. They're like, let's do a workplace culture assessment or some kind of assessment. And then that way we can show them. And It's like, okay. I mean, it's an approach to ask all these questions of the employees, to put together the story of how they're feeling. But then you're using your employees like as a sword, because the trust is not there between like that, the HR person in this example, the hypothetical I'm using, but we've seen it many times, where the HR person and the senior leaders don't have the trust between each other to be able to agree, you know what, you do keep hearing all these things. That's not how we want things to go here. So maybe we should look deeper, is what you would hope the leaders would say.
Right.
But when they sort of brush it off, or they say, which we've heard, oh, our employees are just so entitled. They just want everything. And you're like, no, wait, hold on. They're just saying that they didn't get any kind of training when they were onboarded and they didn't quite know how to do their job. I mean, don't you want them to know how to do their job? I mean, we've had these conversations where the senior leaders get so angry, and you're like, no, but so then it's like, it's not a tool to try to teach a leader either. Like, don't collect a lot of data from your employees. Mm-hmm. Again, get them riled up, get them talking about how they feel, only for your plan to maybe work. Because maybe the leaders still won't care if you present the numbers that people are feeling a certain way. Right. So I think it's like, Are You Ready looks at a lot of factors that mostly should be centering the employees in the process, because that's who you're getting the information from. Right? Not like the turf wars, not like, trying to prove a point, none of those things, because it could actually totally backfire and have the opposite effect of what you're trying to have. Right. Because again, we've heard many, many times, I don't know why they keep asking us. You guys are like the fourth people to ask us. They've done this many times. They don't do anything with it. So if you're not ready to act on it, don't do it.
Find another way. Do something else. Which I liked your suggestion, which was use what you already have and just cut it a different way. Like, do different slices of the data to try to get an understanding of what's actually happening, which can then maybe sell it a little bit more to senior leaders in order to really do what you need to do with a proper assessment. So something that you were saying earlier around DEI and culture, I think we might want to really kind of call that out. Like because what we've observed is that people still keep things separate. Mm-hmm. Like, they still think DEI is one thing and that the rest of the business is something else. And it's like, it's not how that works. It's a lens that you look at things through, you look at the workplace through, and there's a direct correlation between DEI and the workplace. Like, they're connected, because you have a lot of different types of people, hopefully, within your organization that you need to be mindful of. And so why is that separate? But I don't.
So I want to come back to that when we get to analyzing the data, because I think that's really important. Mm-hmm. All right. So first thing is, like, are you even ready for it? Yeah. And really don't play in people's faces. I just implore you, do not ask people stuff you don't want to do anything about. Just don't, please. Number one, because you'll be calling me for an investigation.
Right.
Right. Two, right. Why are you doing it? Is, I think, the other thing, like establishing like your problem statement or like what you're trying to solve for. I think that's pretty straightforward. So it might be you have an actual problem you know about. It might be we're not seeing the productivity we want to see. It might be our attrition rates are, 10% higher than they were last year. Right. It might be we've decided we want to be an employer of choice. And so we want to understand, right? But making sure we understand why are we doing this? Right. Like, what are we trying to get to? Mm-hmm.
And everyone's bought in on that.
Everyone's bought in on that.
At least the stakeholders that are really part of this, they need to be bought in on that.
Now, what's a stakeholder?
Anyone who has who is either impacted by or has an impact on whatever this is a stakeholder.
You see how smart she is, because she just pulled the definition straight out. That's a good ass definition. So we need to know why we're doing it, who our stakeholders are. That's that next piece. Mm-hmm. And then, what are some of the ways that you can go about collecting data to understand employee experience? So we collect data through surveys. We collect data through interviews, one-on-one interviews, specifically with senior leaders. And then we also do listening sessions or focus groups. And that tends to be a fairly decent sized group, typically around
15 to 20 or so. And it's just a way to understand what is the experience, like what's the employee experience as it relates to whatever the assessment, within this case, a culture assessment. So how are people experiencing the workplace in terms of these values, norms, and beliefs? So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think we take the mixed approach of quantitative and qualitative, because I think when you're looking at the employee experience, both are sort of equally important. Getting someone to scale a question of, I would recommend this place to work to others. That's important. The quantitative aspect of that is important to just get a sense of like where your folks are. So for example, if you use ENPS scoring, so that's employee net promoter score. Net promoter score is used in retail and a lot of other environments to judge customer and employee loyalty. And so if you're there's a question you can ask that will give you a score on how committed your team is. Like, would they leave if they got a better job offer? Right. And so if you're getting a score, which ENPS can go from -100 to 100, we've seen negative scores, like a -8, -10. That's giving you some indication that there are issues. So that is important from an indication standpoint. The qualitative feedback helps us understand why there might be an issue. Yeah. So that's why we like to ask the open-ended questions and doing the focus groups of what are the potential root cause factors for this negative score that we're seeing on employee engagement. Right. And I do want to just point out that we're always going to be looking at engagement, whether we call it workplace culture assessment, DEI assessment, whatever the case may be, is because engagement, which is different than satisfaction, really is a stronger indicator of whether or not people are going to stay or not. It gets at that grit. It gets at whether they want to put in the work to be here. If someone's happy or not, that's not really going to tell you if they're going to stay or leave. But it's the piece around, are your employees engaged in your mission, in your values, in your KPIs, in your business lines? Are they engaged in that? Do they want it? Are they committed to it? Yeah. And so those are sort of one other way when we were doing research for this that I was like, oh, that's interesting, because we haven't employed that. That folks have another way you can gauge employee experience is observation, where you could go and observe how folks are interacting in the workplace. I think for me, the thing that stands out about that is that it's almost like when people know a camera is there. Yeah. I don't know how accurate of a view, because we do like to go visit like the work sites of folks, but people definitely act different when we're there. Oh, absolutely. Like when we go on ride along, we go do stuff, you're like, oh, they're pulling out the red carpet for us. Exactly. So it's certainly a way. It's not necessarily one that I would necessarily employ, because I just don't know if you would get like the true view of it. But what I have started asking for is, so people are getting more and more, it's becoming more and more common for people to record team meetings and things like that. Right. I'll ask for those because you all are just working normal, and then I can get some idea of what's happening there.
But body language, you can hear tone and how people talk to one another.
Your favorite word. Watch your tone.
Again, you got to watch it, because it'll get you in trouble. You have to be careful with tone. I think one thing, what was coming up for me as you were talking around, it came up earlier around the change piece. I think that's communicating about this and really setting the stage for this is incredibly important, and getting people, not only just the senior leaders, but again, your stakeholders and anybody else that you're going to talk to, like let them know why this is happening and why it's important and why they should care, and constantly reiterate that message and make sure that they're really vested. Because again, you want the best result from this as possible, but if you don't bring people along with you,
and that's one of the main reasons why we say, like, why are you doing, what's the reason why you're doing this, right? Not just so that, part of that is so that we're not like aimlessly collecting data with no purpose, right? That's important, but it's also important to know the why. Yeah. So you can communicate out to your teams, the Northwest firm is here, they're going to be helping us with this, and they're going to, you can expect this. The reality is a lot of employers do way more than they get credit for, but they don't get credit for it because the communication around it is terrible. Right. Not consistent, not transparent, not, hey, we heard what you said, and so this is why we're doing this, right? There's just a lack of intentionality. And change management we've said it a few times, is a huge part of this. Yeah, it is. Right? And change management is important. You have to communicate what's changing. You have to give people the opportunity to learn, whether through training or otherwise, how to implement the change. And again, you have to keep Talking.
You have to keep talking about it.
I'm talking.
Yep.
All right. So now we have our different collection methods.
Yep.
What do you do with that data once you have it all collected?
You analyze it.
Such a softball question.
There's a number of ways to analyze it, but we like to do a mixed method thematic analysis process.
A mixed method thematic analysis, y'all.
Fancy. Is really just looking at, okay, what are the numbers and then what are the themes coming out of the
It's not that straightforward.
It's not. But you got to simplify things.
So we code every single piece of information we get. So if someone, especially the qualitative data, because we have quantitative numbers with the Likert scale questioning, so those numbers we can take, and then we like to take the qualitative and make it quantitative, right? So that you can know sentiment-wise what percentage of the people we talked to shared some kind of similar thing.
Right.
So we use a blend of AI. We use that's built into our coding tool. We use human expertise to identify high-level themes.
Right.
And then those come from the codes. So codes are like little Lego pieces that can be built into a theme. We find the themes. We support those themes with both, again, the original quantitative data and the qualitative data we've made quantitative. Because we're really trying to get to no more than 3 high-level themes, maybe 5 at most, but really we understand no one can work on more than 3 things, really 1 thing at a time. Most companies say they can do 3, but like, let's just pick one really impactful thing is where we're landing these days. But we certainly aren't going to bombard you with 50,000 themes because you can't work on them all at once.
No. And we also, I want to really reiterate the human component of that. Like we gut check all of this. So we don't, yes, the data is there, but we're doing these sessions. We're in these interviews. We're in these focus groups. And the team gets together and really combs through this to make sure that whatever's presented is real and it's accurate and it reflects what's happening in the organization. So our data analysis process is really, really intense.
It is.
It's intense.
And the reason why is because we're the voice of we're translating the voice of your employees. Again, our role is to translate the voice of your employees. It's not to tell you what we think the issue is. It's telling you what the issue is based on the voice of your employee and using our expertise to translate what they're saying so that it's broken down into these bite-sized pieces that are a little bit easier to consume. But I say that because it's a proverbial don't shoot the messenger kind of situation, going back to the beginning of, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we have executives like arguing with us. And it's like, listen, we're happy to even just give you the raw comments. There's times where it's like, we have no reason to like mix the message. The message is what it is. It's why we have every time we can find another layer.
Yeah.
That's what's been beautiful about, our team embracing AI is that can also give a gut check when we put some of this stuff in here. And just yesterday, I was using AI for some DEI questions and I didn't even agree with what AI had to say about it. Right. So it's sort of like, cool, we're pushing. Yeah. And we do all of that so we can look ourselves in the mirror and say, we're bringing you your employee's voice, right? Yes. It's not colored by our own. It's none of that.
Because it has integrity. Right. Because that's really important.
And if you go back to your why in the beginning, whatever your why was, and reminding yourself, I'm going to be uncomfortable, then it's the only way you're going to grow. We talk about this a lot.
You just got to see it as an opportunity.
Yeah. All right. So we've analyzed. We've given you a really crisp, beautiful deck because they are really crisp and beautiful. We've talked through it. Yep. We've given you, we always go in with 3 to 5 recommendations. You could take or leave. You might have better ideas because you know yourselves in some ways better than we do. Of
course.
Okay. So we've had that conversation. We align with the client on what they want to do. And then what do we do from there?
Get to work. You got to get to work. So what are we going to do? So which one of these do y'all want to do? Is normally the conversation. Like we'll go through it and then they can decide, okay, yeah, this is within reason. We can actually impact this. We can do this change. Cool. So then let's figure out what are the steps involved in order to really get this done. So we start to develop a strategy around and action plans around it, depending on the direction, either a full-fledged strategy or just some action plans just to get something, a quick win, so to speak.
And then just the last thing I would add there is that throughout all of what we're talking about, which can take around 6 months typically, should be communicating. I think employers typically don't want to communicate unless something's done. And in this day and age, people want to know what you're doing all the time. I mean, if you just look at social media and the fact that we can watch somebody get dressed, which is strange to me sometimes, but the whole get ready with me trends or anything where you're getting, it's very invasive, the way in which we share on social media.
Nosy.
Right. That desire for lots of knowledge does not stop when people enter your workplace. So you do need to tell them, hey, Norfolk firm is still here. This is what we've done. Here's what we've completed. This is when you can expect to hear from us. And making sure that you're constantly reminding people that it's still happening. Yeah. Because we also hear a lot of like, oh, I don't know, some consultants came in and then like we didn't hear anything after that. Right. So that's important. So if we recap here, steps wise, first things first, we're talking about workplace culture assessment. You don't want beef at work. It's not all avoidable, but you can avoid a lot of it by being clear about what's happening in your workplace, right? Yeah. So what is your workplace culture intended to be? What's the definition of your norms, practices, values, beliefs? What are they? How does that look in action? Right. Number one. Number two, are you ready to do a workplace culture assessment? Short answer. Be real about that. Be real. Yeah. If you're not ready, just don't do it. Number two, if you are ready, what's your why? Why are you doing it? And communicate that out to all your stakeholders that are involved. Then three, collect data. I don't know why I have 4 fingers up. But anyway, you collect data. I'm going to put my hand down because I don't know what number I'm on. Collect data. And there's multiple ways to do it. Surveys, focus groups, interviews, observations. Analyze the data. We definitely recommend a very well-established standard. You know, the one we use is very well-established so that you can sort of be comfortable that you're using a process that actually makes sense. Present it with your recommendations. Pick something, action plan it, communicate some more. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we got some more on workplace conflict. Yeah. And if you need help with this, because it is challenging. It is. Call us. Yeah. All right. You know where to find us on the internet, as Shantae likes to say, thenorfisfirm.com. Generic. Instagram, what's the deal? The Norfolk Firm, Facebook, we're all over the place, y'all. So check us out. Let us know what you want to hear about, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Here it is. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with.